My name is Sherry Guess, and this is the Heavily Metalled Podcast. On this podcast, I interview patients, medical professionals, and industry insiders, having important discussions regarding the all too commonly experienced but lesser identified symptoms of hypersensitivity to metals contained in implanted medical and dental hardware. These metals often cause a variety of dysfunctional immune responses, chronic pain, and other syndromes that fly under the radar of most patients and physicians. During these interviews, the patients and I discuss ideas for managing symptoms, share personal lifestyle modifications, and talk about how to advocate with and educate providers pre- and post-surgery, along with options found for implant removal and the how-to of adverse event reporting. This podcast does not give medical advice. From time to time, I may interview medical professionals that render personal opinions you can use to follow up with your individual provider. Let's roll. Hello, metalheads, and welcome to the jungle. Thank you for coming back today to this edition of the Heavily Metalled Podcast. Today, we are exploring a metal-free alternative in orthopedics, and I am super excited to have the Chief Medical Officer of OSSIO Fiber, Dr. Greg Berlet, in with us. Dr. Berlet, welcome.
Thanks, Sherry. Happy to be here with you.
For anybody who's dealt with metal hypersensitivity, this is a conversation that super matters. It's really no secret that permanent metal implants can trigger all kinds of allergies, pain, repeat surgeries, removals, as I can personally attest after 8 hardware removals, and OSSIO's trying to solve that. Dr. Berlet is a fellowship-trained orthopedic foot and ankle surgeon. He's an educator, a product developer. He was appointed OSSIO's Chief Medical Officer in 2021, and he was the Chief of Foot and Ankle Surgery at Ohio State University. He's published more than 100 peer-reviewed publications and held leadership roles at many trade organizations. So we're very honored to have him with us today. Dr. Berlet, can you share your journey from foot and ankle surgeon to chief medical officer at OSSIO and what brought you to the company?
Sure. Thanks, Sherry. I'm an orthopedic surgeon, dual trained sports and foot and ankle, but I've really built my career in foot and ankle. It's been an awesome and amazing journey in that 2 things happened simultaneously. I was building a very large orthopedic group in Columbus, Ohio, and we were solely focused on foot and ankle. We've had up to 15 surgeons at a time in one group just doing foot and ankle, which really made us probably the biggest foot and ankle play in the nation. And as we were doing that through the years, what we realized is that our industry, that is the orthopedic industry, was not really creating instruments and tools that allowed us to thrive. While we were building OFA, which was my group, I really partnered with a lot of industry to create foot and ankle specific tools. And one of those companies that people might know is Wright Medical. And myself, along with some colleagues and really talented engineers, built out a pretty large company in the foot and ankle space. With that said, I've been in the industry a long time. I'm very much a data guy. And so I'll watch trends in what are our surgeons using, how are they using it, how patients are responding to it, what patients are asking for. And so it's a really fluid process and conversation that goes on. So it won't surprise you that what we thought was cutting edge back in 2000 is not cutting edge in 2025. And the good news is that our technologies are better, our engineers are better, and our patients are smarter. And that last part is really important because we've entered the age of consumerism in healthcare. And I think it's a good thing.
How early pre-OSSIO were you seeing patients concerned about metal hypersensitivity? And did you have any awareness of systemic metal hypersensitivity, not just local reactions to metal?
Yeah. So if we talk about metal and foot and ankle specifically, is probably the most common operation is ankle fractures. And a lot of time, an ankle fracture needs to be fixed because the bones have to be properly set, and then they have to be held there with plates and screws. So we're doing a lot of that. And in what goes hand in hand with that is hardware removal. And the hardware removal can be for a variety of reasons. It can be because it rubs the shoe. It can be because they have a hypersensitivity response to it. But a general rule of thumb is somewhere around 20% of hardware was being removed. So from the orthopedic surgeon side is every day in the OR would have at least one or maybe two hardware removals. So when you're doing that, you identify that there's a problem here. If the world was perfect, we would do the surgery once, do it really well, and be done. And with that example, that's just not what's really playing out. Through the years, there was various attempts to do it, usually more on screw configurations, but bioabsorbables are not a new idea. They've been on the market the whole time that we've been evolving it, and they've come and gone. And the reason that they've come is there's a need, meaning, can we get away from metal? The reason they've gone is their formulations had a tendency to create a pretty intense inflammatory response. And you ended up taking them out, which was what we were trying to avoid doing with the metal in the first place. So to answer your question, metal's been a problem as long as we've been putting it in. And we can talk about metallurgy if you want. But the alternative to metal, we've been going for a while. My story with OSSIO is a little different, as I met their chief scientific officer in Toronto, Canada, in around 2015. And at the time, he had a material, which is the OSSIO Fiber. He did not have a commercial rendition of it yet. And Iran and I sat and talked, and I was very intrigued about the material. And what I was really interested in is, does it have an inflammatory response? And he convinced me that it's got some unique features that makes it a lot less likely that it would have that inflammatory response. And once I dug deep with him, and he was really generous with his knowledge, I made a pitch and I said, this really needs to come into the foot and ankle first. We created a product manifestation of it, which was a hammer toe. And we said, you know what? Let's try this product. Let's see if it's everything that you say it's going to be. And it did. So my role with OSSIO came from a guy super interested in their material to creating a product manifestation of it. And then once they started creating a little bit more product, then they asked if I would step into a more official role. And so I've been their CMO now for, I think, maybe 6 or 7 years.
That's great. Okay, so let's go back just a minute and tell me, for listeners who are new to OSSIO, who is the company, and broadly, what problem are they trying to solve?
Yeah, OSSIO is a company founded around a novel technology. And the technology is mineral fibers that are then bound together using a material called PLGLA, which is really a bonding agent. Both the mineral fibers and the PLGLA will resorb. The minerals bio-integrate, and that's one of the taglines of OSSIO, is this is bio-integration. The PLGLA will be absorbed by the body. The difference here is that the original bioabsorbables were all PLGLA, and it was the high concentration of those materials that was creating the inflammatory response. Their volume is so low in the OSSIO, you just don't create that inflammatory response. So this material, though, can be shaped however you want. So the limitation is your creativity, not the material. So if you want to make a plate, you can make a plate. If you want to make a screw, you can make a screw. And all of these configurations are out there. I don't want to pretend that it's easy. It's really advanced engineering that's going on here. But these are very strong materials. So if you take an OSSIO screw, it's much stronger than natural human cortical bone, which is the strongest bone in the body. And as a general rule, you don't need to be stronger than the body. You need to be just strong as. And then the goal in our science and our experience is that this material just turns back to natural human bone, usually over the course of 18 to 24 months. Pretty crazy idea, but it's true.
That's incredible. So many questions. Break down a little more for me, because I think probably our listeners are like I am. It's a little bit over our heads. Can you break down a little more of what the OSSIO fiber is made of? The materials you reference, I'm not super aware of what they are, but are those proprietary, or can you explain them maybe a little more in layman's terms?
Sure. OSSIO is made up of the natural minerals that are in our bodies already. So this is calcium and magnesium and silicon, all of these materials. The proprietary part of it is how these are combined together and how you pull a fiber or a thread out of it. Those threads are then put into a material that is kind of strips, if you will, and then those strips are fashioned into the shape that you want with the reinforcement where you know it needs to be strongest, and then pressurable to create the product. So there's nothing non-natural about this. The body very much likes it. And the strength is a really important piece of this because you can dial that in so that you get the strength you need at time zero, the strength that is maintained until the body heals, and then just gradually goes away as it biointegrates and becomes you. So this is not foreign to you. This is what you need when you need it. And the only thing that's left is you, which is the novel idea here.
So how strong is it compared to bone or metal?
It's about 5 times stronger in cortical bone. But again, you can dial it in. So I don't want to leave you or your listeners with the idea that there's this one thing and then that thing is created in multiple is every product manifestation. So a screw will have a different mechanical demand on it than, say, a metal plate.
Okay.
And each of those will be individually engineered for what they intended to be used with. So that if you can dream it, if you're in the foot and ankle, for example, and you are doing a fusion operation, which bonds 2 bones together, you need the materials to be pretty strong while the bones are healing. And so these will be engineered to meet that need.
Got it. I just did an episode recently, and I don't know if you saw it, with Dr. Parekh, who had a 3D printed talus device that he's using. What kind of comparison could you draw between something like this with OSSIO and something like a 3D printed? Are you still seeing foreign body reactions more than you would like with the 3D printed things, or are they both good alternatives?
So
obviously,
I know
3D printed, it's not absorbed by the body.
We'll get a little engineering here. So I know Dr. Parekh, really creative guy. And 3D printing is representing how something is made, and it doesn't represent the material. So you can 3D print metal, you can 3D print ceramics like he is, you can do all kinds of things. We do not 3D print OSSIO. OSSIO is a 3-dimensional matrix that its core material kind of looks like a shoelace, if you will, a lot more sophisticated than that. But then it is put into layers. It can be wound and done things like that that make it stronger. Yeah, 3D printing is exciting, but 3D printing is limited by the ability of that manufacturing technique to lay it down. This 3-dimensional structure is different, and it's going to be a lot more biologic friendly because of its nature.
I would imagine you would probably still have foreign body reaction. Anybody can react to anything. That's a huge focus of my podcast because I almost died from a type 4 delayed hypersensitivity to metal. But I would imagine that even if you have a 3D printed ceramic, 3D printed plastic, something, there's still a chance for the body to mount an immune response and an inflammatory reaction versus something like, and I'm not trying to pit one company against another. I think they all have their place in surgery. But I think if you have something that is going to be absorbed by the body and disappear over time, that might be more ideal if the situation warrants that kind of hardware.
Right. Yeah. And so to simplify my answer, 3D printing is unlikely to impact anything to do with your inflammatory response. It's simply how the material is being formulated. It's the material that's going to create the inflammatory response.
Got it.
And 3D printing's just one way to make a form.
Got it. What kind of imaging do patients and surgeons see as the OSSIO integrates after surgery?
If I can, let me use a clinical example that I think you'll resonate with, and it explains a lot about what's going on in our foot and ankle industry. Okay. I said earlier that consumerism has come to medicine, and definitely orthopedic surgery. And that's a good thing because it means that the patient's voice is being represented in the conversation. Gone are the days with, here's what you've got, here's what we're going to do. I'm not really taking any questions, just sign the sheet. What happens now is people come to your office, just about 100% of them are informed or at least have an idea of what their diagnosis is. They have read about it, they're informed about it. And when they're in your office, first they've selected you, and that's a consumer process. So they've looked at reviews and they said, this is the guy or girl I want to see. Second is they will have some opinions about how they think their problem should be resolved. And that is all really good because what we do better now than we've ever done is shared decision-making. Sherry, you come with your ideas. My job is to present some factual material, and then we'll engage together and you'll influence me and I'll influence you. And I'll say, hey,
Oh my gosh, I
ready.
wish it worked that way with every surgeon I know. It just doesn't. Your doctors like you are amazing, because I would say that 75% of surgeons are still old school and they are not interested in what the consumer says, because they all think we subscribe to Dr. Google and they just don't want to hear it because they've been in the business for 30 years.
And I'll say that behavior is just going to get selected out by the market. There's no reason you have to see that doctor. You say, look, I didn't have a good interaction. Good. Go find a new doctor who listens to you. That statement would come out of my mouth frequently when I'm talking to people.
Yeah.
So if you take that context, in foot and ankle, there's bunions. As you likely know, bunion is a sore spot on the inside of your big toe. And bunions are pretty common. There is data that says there's at least a couple million untreated bunions in the US. And the big question that comes up is, why aren't people having them treated? And the answer is that historically, the correction has been a little unpredictable, and the experience has gotten a reputation as being fairly miserable. So if you mix a miserable recovery with an uncertain outcome, people go, you know what, I'll just live with the devil I know and I'll keep my bunions. So if you then feed that into what's been happening, there was a company in the US called Treece Medical who did a really good job of focusing on just this one problem. And what they said, and they can back it up, is with a predictable technique to correct it, we can make this an operation that it's worth it. Meaning if you pay the money and you go through the experience, at the end of the day, our satisfaction rates are going to be high. Okay. So that got some of those 2 million people coming into the market, and they became very consumer directed people, meaning they would come to my office. They'll say, I do have a bunion. I want it fixed. Here's how I want you to fix it. And boom. So our bunion patients became great consumers, and they really started molding our industry, which is good. There's lots of evolution though. One is other companies came into that market with similar processes. So that's good because now the whole industry is doing a better job. But here's the part they missed, is they were still fixing bunions with metal. And so this is a consumer who says, I want this fixed, I want this, but they're still putting in metal, and that metal often needs to come out or creates a hypersensitivity response. And so at OSSIO, we recognize this, and we didn't create the jigs. We didn't create all of the techniques. What we said is, how about you fix your bunion? You fix it with material that you cannot see on x-ray. And we branded that as the ghost bunion. So fix it once, fix it really well with whatever system works for you. Use a material that doesn't involve metal, that doesn't have the hypersensitivity response. And when you're done, you'll have a foot you like, experience that wasn't too bad, and none of that downside long-term risk.
Wow. That's pretty incredible. I guess I'm surprised at the percentage of foot and ankle hardware you said was removed overall. I don't think that stands true from other orthopedic procedures. As a matter of fact, I just helped a guy through a hardware removal surgery on his spine. He'd been to more than 20 doctors asking for 15 years for his hardware to be removed, and nobody would do it. And I think part of my job with my podcast is to increase the awareness of not only localized reactions to the metal hardware, but systemic reactions. I think a lot of surgeons don't realize that there's trace nickel and other trace alloys in commercially pure titanium. And I wish we could get that narrative out there. So I'm really excited for the foot and ankle industry that they're taking out so much hardware. And I'm glad that you're trying to solve this problem where you don't have to take out the hardware, because the burden of a removal or a revision surgery is on the patient. We have a new deductible. We have a new copay. It's not a warranty situation where there's a recall and, hey, you come in here and we'll change it out, or you pay this first charge for your first surgery and the removal's included. It's not. The cost is passed on to the patient. So this is a problem that really needs to be solved if the surgeon can even identify, or the patient can even identify, that their fibromyalgia that they've had for 10 years is coming from 3 cholecystectomy clips.
There's so much that you've said in there that can be wrapped up, and I'll take them on one by one. One is hardware removal from foot and ankle is generally easier than spine. So that's probably why foot and ankle hardware removal is a little bit more common. The second is that it's not without risk to take out hardware.
Of course.
And it's sometimes hard to assume that problem when you're not the person who put it in. So that's why the guy's having trouble. 3 is the fee code just doesn't support the complexity of any of that. And spending a couple hours taking out spine surgery that somebody else put in is sometimes just a no-win for.
Yeah, that's an upcoming episode. This was a surgeon that was God's gift, because this 2-hour surgery turned into 6 hours, and the head of every screw broke off, and they had to get tools and dig those rods out, and it was a mess.
And this isn't the motivation, but the compensation for that would be hundreds of dollars at best.
That's what I was going to say. He probably got $300 for that 6-hour surgery.
The fee code doesn't support anything to do with that. And so it is real.
That needs to change for the suffering patient, in my opinion. We're going off the rails here, but.
No, it's okay to go off the rails. I think the lacking piece is definitive testing that says, here it is. And that's the part that's still a little bit fuzzy out there. And there is some testing. There's nothing that our societies are really getting behind. But if there was a test that you said, this is a yes or no test, and it tests yes, there's just no debate. It's got to come out, and that's the way it is. As long as there's a little bit of room for fuzzy, then people dodge it and say, I don't
know. Do you feel, so for me, I had blood lymphocyte transformation testing, and it was a slam dunk. My nickel was off the chart. Do you feel that's a fuzzy test, just out of curiosity?
Yeah. So what?
Or do you not know much about it, which is fine if you don't. I'm just curious what the perception is.
I do, but remember, everything is driven these days around treatment guidelines. And until the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons and the AMA come out and say, this test means this, it's not going to be widely recognized. And that right now, we have no major societies, so our hip and knee societies are not advocating for any one test. The AAOS, American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons, is not advocating for any one test. And so it's just it's getting left, and I call it fuzzy because it ends up being really engaged doctors who really care, who carry the burden, and then they're left with the burden of trying to convince the surgeons to take the stuff out.
And that's exactly where we are. And lovely podcasters as well.
But if you could get the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons to acknowledge a test and what it means, you could change everybody's perspective.
I don't drink, but hold my beer. It's going to happen.
Okay.
And now, a word from our sponsor. Attention metalheads. Are you struggling with skin rashes, joint and systemic pain, or fatigue that just won't go away? Type 4 metal allergy is often overlooked as a culprit in many of today's chronic illnesses. Get to the root of the problem with ELISA testing. ELISA is a scientifically proven and clinically validated test that measures immune reactivity to metal allergens like nickel, cobalt, and titanium. With fast and reliable results, you can get the answers you need to find relief and live a healthier life. Don't let metal allergies control your life any longer. Visit melisa.org to learn more and schedule your test. Trust us, you'll be glad you did. MELISA, a valuable diagnostic tool in medicine.
All right, let's get back from the rails. Which procedures today can OSSIO products be used for?
OSSIO is the parent company name. OSSIO Fiber is the material. And OSSIO Fiber can be formulated into screws, plates, staples, nails. And in the foot and ankle space, we use it for fusion surgeries. We use it for bunion surgeries. We use it around the ankle. In fracture care, it's used in the hand. It is used around the knee in a lot of sports applications for if you have to shift bones around, which we call osteotomies. It can be used to secure that. And it's being used in the treatment of early stage arthritis, where you have a lot of swelling around the knee and you've got a patient that it's identified as a bone issue, not as much a cartilage issue, and you're trying to buy some time. For somebody who may eventually need a joint replacement, but if you can kick that down the road 10 or more years, you're doing everybody a favor. So the OSSIO Fiber products are not indication specific, meaning it's not this screw for this surgery only. It allows for the creativity. And from the surgeon point of view, you don't have to learn anything new. So if you know how to put a screw in, you can put an OSSIO screw in. If you know how to apply a staple, you can apply the OSSIO staple. So that's one of the big value adds from a surgeon point of view. You don't have to take a new learning curve.
Okay, let me ask you this. So I recently had, about 2 years ago, a surgery for Tarlov cyst repair. I had to open the sacral bone and to access the nerve roots at S2. And we had a very great surgeon, had a neurosurgery over at Sutter Health in Sacramento, Dr. Rudolf Schroet. He was very friendly to my metal hypersensitivity, and we looked everywhere for a microplate and some micro screws that could be used on the sacrum, so I didn't have to undergo a second surgery to remove that once the bone healed. We were not able to find something when we needed it. Is this something that could be made to order with OSSIO? Or does it take way too long and is it not practical?
So the last one is the right statement. It's not practical.
Today.
If there's one-offs are just difficult on an orthopedic manufacturing scale because you have to engineer around how the material needs to be formulated. You then have to create custom presses that then get the material to its final form. You then have to do all the mechanical testing and so on. And so one-offs will never work with that OSSIO process. One-offs might work. Even this would be tough, but one-offs might work with some 3D printing. That's the whole allure of 3D printing, is that it's an engineering work, not as much an engineering challenge. But with OSSIO, I don't know your situation, but
these were plates used in facial surgery. That's the type of plates that were used. Would craniofacial be the right word?
Craniofacial is right. Yep. Yeah, and that's the space that OSSIO will be in. We have a growing market share in pediatrics for a lot of the same reasons. Trying to treat the problem, which in children, elbow fractures is a good example, treat the problem with something that doesn't set them up for what is pretty traumatic experience for a child. That is surgery and then going back to have things come out. So it's got a really nice story in pediatrics.
Well, you're remarkable. You have like X-ray vision. You seem to know the question I'm going to ask before I even get there, because pediatric FDA clearances was my next question. And I think I can't imagine as a child having metal put in. And then just from my perspective, which is different than your perspective, I suffered 10 years before I knew it was a metal allergy that was causing all my pain. And literally, if you've got 20% of the population allergic to nickel and 3 to 5% of that systemically allergic, and you put that in a child, I can't imagine that I was able to deal with the pain I had in every cell of my body. And you take that into a child, it's life-changing.
Yeah, and remember, the child is different than you. You're an adult and you have experience and you know how to use your words and you know what's normal for you. A child doesn't have all of that skill. They don't even know what it feels to feel well or unwell, or how do you express this? Second, you know this, but I'll say it again, is hardware removal surgery is very expensive. The most expensive part of surgery, it's not your surgeon, it's not the implant, it's the facility cost. The hospital or the ASC represents probably 80% of the cost of surgery. And so going back and doing more surgery is super expensive to the system, and our system can't sustain that. So that's the economic argument. The other argument is the impact on the child and the family, and that's real. And so if you can find an alternative to metal, then I think it makes sense. And that's the value pitch in the pediatric place for us.
Of course. Let's talk for a minute about adoption of the use of OSSIO, access to the product, and then reimbursement. How widely available is the OSSIO Fiber product? How do patients find surgeons that are trained with OSSIO?
OSSIO is only sold in the United States, and the United States is a great place to be a patient and a surgeon if you can get access.
Yes.
We've got a very tiered system, and we can go way off the rails on that. If you can have access, there's probably no better system in the country. If you can't have access, there are plenty of better systems than the US. But product awareness is a bit of a ground game. And we increase OSSIO awareness on print media. So we do it in journals. We're at meetings where we're getting people's hands on it. We publish a lot now. And then we're on social. There's one really interesting social campaign on the ghost bunion. And it's somebody, just a person on the street doing interviews. And they'll say, hey, if you had a bunion, you had to have it fixed, and you were picking between metal and non-metal alternative that was just as strong, which would you pick? And it's not, but it's not vanilla responses. People react really strongly to that question. And it would make you smile, Sherry, because you're a believer in the problem of metal. And
maybe I need to go to the street, my man.
Just watch the social campaign. Watch the OSSIO person on the street campaign, and you'll smile, because these are people who are not really having surgery. So this is a theoretical thing, but they respond really strongly to this question. Once we get awareness, then we go through the typical process, which is a value analysis committee at the hospital. And the value proposition here is no second surgeries, and they can do it. Is it as cheap as a screw? No, that's the whole reason that screws are such a dominant market share is they're relatively inexpensive to make. And so they have pretty good margins for the companies and honestly for the facilities.
So who pays for the increase in material costs? The surgeon, the insurance, the patient?
Yeah, so contracting is wildly different, again, all over the country, and it can be individual even in the practice. But in my practice, for example, if we had 5 people having surgery, one of them might have to have it at the hospital because their insurance company says it has to be at the hospital. It's a dumb idea, but it happens. And at the hospital, the contract might be that the hospital buys the material and then flows it through at no markup, or they might flow it through at 400% markup. And so it's all over the place. And so who really pays for it all is an individualized thing. And if you want to tease apart EOB's explanation of benefits,
yes,
that will turn my head inside out. And I've been in the game for 30 years and I try to do that for my patients, but often they have to leave it with me and I have to go get other resources to try and come back and explain why it was. Yeah.
Tell me what the response to OSSIO has been like from surgeons, hospitals, and patients in the clinical setting.
The way that's usually answered is adoption. So if you use the material once, what are the odds of using it again? Or a different way to say it is if you use 3 different products from the OSSIO line, what are the odds that you'll use it again? And both of those are well above industry averages on all of those. So once it's used once, that's always a once, right? That can be just tried out. But if you've used the product more than 3 times, the adoption is way above market standards. When people get it and they sit back, so I like thoughtful surgeons who do something for a reason. I like that they're transparent so that the patient understands what they're doing, why they're doing it. So they're doing it together. And then stand back and watch and tell me what you and your patient experienced that 1 month, 3 months, 1 year. That's the kind of stuff, because then you start to build a little bit of science instead of just a, oh, gee whiz experience.
Tell me about insurance. Are the procedures that are using OSSIO reimbursed under existing codes, or do patients need to advocate for coverage differently?
No. So they're reimbursed under current codes. So bunion codes, they're usually independent of the type of fixation that's going to be used there. If we go back to bunions, when they became sexy, they also became pretty good for a surgeon to do, meaning that it was fairly reimbursed for their time and effort. And so with that, there's a little bit of more room in there to use innovative materials like OSSIO.
Got it. So every new technology faces criticism. What have been the biggest objections from surgeons, and how do you address those?
So there'll be a few of them. One is that because the platform is so versatile, a lot of people will ask for something that's not in the current product offering. And they'll say, I got a great idea for you. How about we do this? And our answer is, let's understand what you're asking first, and then let's understand the business case for it. And if they both match, then we say, yeah, we'll put it in the pipeline and we'll start working on it. But it's not a simple process. Our pipeline, we have a 2.5-year out pipeline. So it's not like it's going to be ready for you tomorrow. So that's a good and a bad problem, right? One, you're not giving them really what you want, but 2 is they're creative enough to see it. It is more expensive than a metal screw. And so people have to understand that. And so the conversation can be a little bit nuanced because not everybody is willing to count the second time surgery into the overall cost. In the US, we tend to group them into, all right, surgery 1, what did it cost? And completely ignore the idea that a second surgery really should be lumped into that original cost. So you have to do a little bit of education around that. And then the third part is people want to see strength data, and that's great. We're very transparent, and we'll share that with them all day and show them our mechanical testing and why this is stronger than cortical bow.
Okay. Have there been failures recalls or adverse event reports with OSSIO? And then how do you address safety concerns in an open manner?
Okay. Yeah. So all of that is mandated by the FDA in that there is a reporting that comes. And if there's reports, then we need to address it. The implant removals that I'm aware of, and I don't see them all, is there's been some infection cases. We don't believe it's driven by the osseo implant, but it's a secondary infection, meaning the wound failed and it came in and the osseo was removed. That's not that hard of a process. The material can be moved. There have been no safety recalls on osseo implants.
Great.
And there's certainly nothing open with the FDA on osseo.
Nice. Okay. Some listeners think that new equals risky. What would you say to them about the track record so far?
New equals risky is an interesting idea. So we have something like 65,000 implants now in patients. So this is not new. There's not a learning curve going on here. And we know how the material behaves over time. And we're very confident in our bio-integrative claim that this material goes away and turns into your own. But I would ask them to participate with me or their surgeon in that shared decision making and understand the broader conversation of risk and expense associated with using a metal implant, and just understand that there's decisions that need to be made on both sides. And if you're accepting risk for metal, then knock yourself out. That's great. That's what people have been using for years. But if you don't want to accept that risk for metal, or like you have a reason you just flat out cannot use it. And that's not uncommon, for the record. There's up to 20% of foot and ankle patients will report some degree of metal hypersensitivity.
Yeah.
So if that's you, then you're either living with your problem or you're looking for an innovative material like osseo that lets you get the help you need without having to accept the burden of metal.
I think as we were talking, we skipped over, but I definitely want to come back and catch this. How does a patient find a surgeon that works with the osseo material?
There's a surgeon locator on the osseo website, and it's a pretty robust platform that's updated regularly. So it's ossio, OSSIO. And if you search osseo, first of all, I think you'll find it interesting. Spend a little bit of time on the page looking at the material. But there's also a surgeon locator feature on there.
What's the learning curve for a new surgeon who wants to use the product?
That's the beauty. It's pretty much zero. If you know how to put in a screw, you can put in an osseo screw. If you know how to apply a plate, you can apply it. So there is no learning curve for the surgeon. So it's not a technique challenge.
Love that. What's next for osseo? What are you working on? Trauma, larger joints, maybe spine?
What's going on now is we're continuing to keep our focus on the foot and ankle. Sports is a very active part. Sport knee, sport shoulder is a very good growth section for us. Pediatrics. This is on label for all patients over the age of 2. And the pediatric surgeon community is getting very interested in what we're doing. So we will continue to service those markets. Hand will come into that as well. We do not have anything under active development for spine. So sorry about that. Maybe we'll get there.
Can we fix that?
Yeah. It's remember how the process goes, right? You present the idea, we do the market research, and then go. And
lumbar and cervical fusion surgeries could use you like yesterday.
That's the idea. We consider osseo a platform company, not a product company. We're limited only by the creativity and the resources to be able to build product.
How do you balance innovation with patient safety and surgeon safety and trust?
You have to understand how the material behaves. So when you're using a bio-integrative product, which obviously has a biologic feature to it, you have to be really confident that you understand how the human body responds to this material. And we're very confident. Like I say, we're mid 60,000s in terms of implants. So we're really confident we know how that goes. And then you roll from there. It's not a new application, has a new risk profile. We think our risk profile is well defined. And so as we go into new product formulations, we do all the FDA steps and all the mechanical testing, but we don't think we create a new biologic risk by doing a new product.
Awesome. What role do you see osseo playing in reducing the humanitarian crisis of metal hypersensitivity in the long term?
It's a market thing, right? And you and I touched on this earlier, is that metal hypersensitivity is under-recognized. As a general rule, difficult to really put your finger on it. for anybody, for patient surgeons, if we could get a little bit more black and white in terms of here's the testing recommended, here is the recommended resolution when that testing turns positive, then those clinical guidelines would help us a ton and it would help our patients a ton. Right now, we don't have all of that. And so it can be hard for patients to access care.
I can see that would be helpful because if you give a surgeon a protocol, then they can follow that. If you're asking them to create their own protocol, it's like, where do you start? Because they're all starting from a different knowledge base.
And we don't like this for the record, but we have been kind of force-fed into clinical guidelines now for quite a while. Insurance companies force us into it. Our medical societies force it into it. So with that is we like clinical guidelines. And this would be something that would be super beneficial to us if our societies would take the lead on some clinical guidelines for metal hypersensitivity.
Duly noted. Okay, so for patients that are listening who are facing surgery, how do they bring up OSSIO to their surgeon if their surgeon isn't familiar with it?
Just the way they're already. Just be an informed patient. You come to your appointment with the idea of what you think's going on. If you don't know, you don't have to know. That's fine. But then that would be the follow-up appointment. So on the first appointment, I learned from you, doctor, that I have this. We talked about some options. And then on follow-up visits, if this idea of surgery comes up, and then you say, okay, here's my concern about metal. Are you aware of this material? If you're not familiar with it, would you do your own research? And then next time we can talk. And remember, I always said with my patients is that one visit is one visit. It's a snapshot. I can't really fully understand your situation until I can get a little bit more of a movie script. And I only achieve that by engaging with you a few times. So it's okay to say, hey, today's appointment's done. I've got a little bit of homework. It'd be great if you did the little homework. Let's meet again in a few weeks and we'll carry the conversation on. In OSSIO, it's okay for the patient to introduce OSSIO to the surgeon. The surgeon will be interested at the very least. If it's appropriate, then they'll probably consider it. If it's not, then hopefully they'll be able to explain why it's not.
Okay. And for the surgeons listening, what's the best way to learn and train in the technology? You said there's really no learning curve.
Yeah. So the best way is to go to the website, familiarize yourself with it, and then find an opportunity that we're at. So if it's a society meeting, we'll be there. If not, and you're interested, then you can contact us through the website and we'll be happy to engage with you and explain and answer your questions.
Okay, perfect. In closing, are there any thoughts that you would like to leave or anything that we haven't covered that you want to get out there?
No, I think in keeping with the theme, this is a fluid conversation. And so this conversation with you and I in another year would be interesting. Say, who's taking on this challenge? What have you learned new? What's going on? And so this is a process. This is not a one-off. And so congrats to you for taking on a tough subject that not everybody loves you talking about, but it's real. And we are paying attention to you and we are doing something about it.
I love that. Bio-integrative fixation may sound futuristic. As we've heard and as we talked about, it's already impacting a lot of patient lives. Dr. Berlet, I really thank you for helping us understand what OSSIO is building and why it matters. And I promised you that this question was coming, but you need to tell us what your favorite heavy metal band and your favorite heavy metal song is.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to AC/DC and Back in Black. I've got a great memory of a party out on a pool deck with friends, dancing and carrying on to Back in Black. So that's my answer.
Awesome. That was the first song I ever learned to play on the drums. Fun fact.
There we go.
Okay, so I am going to look forward to my ongoing relationship with OSSIO. I'm sure we'll be having you back and look forward to see what OSSIO is going to come out with in the future. This is a follow-up question for me, but would a cardiac or vascular stent ever be a thing, or are they of a more permanent nature and probably not something that would fit well with OSSIO?
Vascular stents tend to be more elastic type materials or dynamic materials. So this doesn't have that kind of recoil feature.
Not today. Okay. I want to urge everybody to go to heavilymetalled.com. We have a whole page of resources. We have a petition that you can sign to urge facilities and doctors to test ahead of time for metal hypersensitivity. That is much needed. And we look forward to seeing you all back on the next episode of the Heavily Metal Podcast. Dr. Berlet, thank you for being part of the narrative to tell the medical industry that things need to change and that we're not going to go with the same old, we're not going to take it anymore.
Thank you for tuning in today. Please don't forget to follow me on social media and to like, share, and subscribe. My primary mission is reaching out to others who may be suffering from hypersensitivity reactions to metal implants and pointing them to resources that can assist with hope, help, and healing. If you know someone that suffers from a chronic illness, you might ask if they have any implanted metal hardware and if they've ever had a reaction to jewelry or metals of any kind. Might not even be on their radar. Visit us at heavenlymetal.com where you can find images and documentation relating to our show today, as well as a number of valuable resources and links to assist you on your own personal healing journey. Until next time, keep on rocking.